Hey, this video lecture covers objectives 2 and 3 in chapter 7, and this video lecture is extremely important in this chapter, and I hope you can spend enough time understanding all these issues and make sure you also work on the homework questions. And let's get started. So we're going to talk about how to use the CVP analysis to find break-even points and target profit volumes. So what is break-even? I guess many of you guys have taken econ classes already. So the break-even point is the sales level at which operating income is zero. Okay, so if sales above break-even, then you get a profit. If the sales below break-even, then you have loss. So break-even is where you have same cost and same revenues. So basically, you earn nothing. Okay, you earn nothing. So the fixed expenses equals total contribution margin. That's very important because you can see that total contribution margin is nothing but revenues minus variable costs. So the idea is the revenues minus variable costs should be the same as the fixed costs when you have break even. Okay, when you have break even. And the second way to understand the break-even point is the total sales equals total expenses. So there are a couple of ways you can describe a break-even point. And the first one is the one we more like econ method. Operating income is zero, so sales above break-even, profit sales below break-even, get a loss. The second way is relatively more accounting method. So the fixed expenses equals total contribution margin. That's where you get a break-even. The last one is also a little bit econ idea that total sales equals total expenses. So now the question is, do we really have to set up equations and do all kinds of complicated calculations? In accounting, actually you don't have to do that. In accounting, there is a very nice formula sitting here, and this is called a units sold formula. So we try to use contribution margin to calculate break-even point in units. So the units sold is the result of the quantity fixed expenses plus operating income divided by contribution margin per unit. Contribution margin per unit. So when you look at a break-even point, operating income is practically zero. So that's very easy to follow. So if we go back to the case example, say K has an Intel poster business. She currently sells each poster for $35, which each poster has a variable cost of $21, and K has a fixed cost of $7,000. K is currently selling 550 posters. Okay, so let's take a look at can we find the break-even point for K's business? So if we apply this very wonderful formula, that actually is pretty simple. So if you look at units sold at break-even, the fixed expenses is 7,000, which is right here. Operating income is zero. Why? Well, break-even point. At break-even point, operating income is always zero. Okay, and what is contribution margin per unit? It's $14. You can always get this $14 from the prior slide, or you can actually just do one-step calculation. This is $35. Actually, that's a result of $35 minus $21. If you can see these numbers here, selling price is $35 and the variable cost is $21, so the result is $14. So you can actually also use this way to find the contribution margin per unit. So you divide 7,000 by $14 and the calculator will give you 500 posters. So this number tells me that in order to break even, K has to sell 500 posters. So now K is selling 550 posters, which is way above the 500 posters break-even point. So I would say K is making profit for sure. Okay, so this is how you can use a contribution margin to find the break-even point. The second question is sometimes okay, I'm going to the next slide. So second question is sometimes we may wonder, hey, how to figure out break-even in sales dollars. So it's quite a different question, but the idea is quite similar. So basically, you can always ask, at the break-even point, how many units I must sell, and in order to break even, how much is the total revenues? So you can always ask these kind of questions. So the sales dollars is more about revenues. So how to find the sales dollars? Okay, sales dollars at break even. So one method you can do is you can always multiply. You can always use a contribution margin ratio. So you can divide the quantity of fixed expenses plus operating income by contribution margin ratio. So in this case, you started with the $7,000 fixed expenses plus 0, which is operating income. And we know the reason, right? In the prior question, we knew that, well, at break even, operating income is 0. Okay, operating income equals profit. That's 0, so you have to put 0 here. So you may ask me, hey, how you get 40%? Why contribution margin ratio is 40%? Once again, you can go to learning objective 1 to pull out the number. However, if you don't know how to do it, I can kind of show you that. Remember, contribution margin ratio is contribution margin divided by actually the selling price. Okay. I hope you still remember all these numbers. In the prior slide, we have a $14 contribution margin per unit. I think you still remember that, which is a $35 minus 21. And also in the prior slide, we have a $35 selling price. So you divide contribution margin by the selling price. That's how you get 40%. Then you divide 7,000 by 40%. That's how you get the sales in dollars. Okay, sales dollars. So finally, the result is 17,500. So in order to break even, KL must have 17,500 revenues. Okay, 500 revenues. So that's actually how we apply the contribution margin and the contribution margin ratio to study break even. In units and in sales dollars. I hope you kind of enjoy those questions. So now the next issue is, KL actually is more aggressive and she wants to make more money. She doesn't like the break even, because who likes break even? Basically, you earn nothing, right? Okay, you earn nothing at break even. So let's assume that K wants to earn a profit of 4,900. So the question is, in order to earn that operating income, how many units will K need to sell? So units to be sold, this similar formula, the fixed expenses plus operating income divided by contribution margin per unit. And in this case, the operating income is not 0 anymore. So we have the same 7,000. The fixed expenses remain constant. We know that. But operating income this time is 4,900 because it's not break even anymore. The contribution margin per unit stays constant. It's $14. So therefore, we can add 7,000 to 4,900. You get 11,900. Then divided by 14, which is 850 posters. Okay. So units to be sold. We can see that in order to earn an operating income of 4,900, K must sell 850 posters, which is pretty clear. You may ask me, hey, well, for 850 posters, so how much is the total revenues? Well, you can actually multiply 850 posters by the selling price, which is $35. You can go all the way back to the information slide, the case business, to figure out this $35. So you multiply $35 by 850 posters, then you can figure out, okay, in order to achieve the target profit, the K must have 29,750 profits, which is equivalent to selling 850 posters. And also you can use the contribution margin per unit to do that. So in this case, you can also divide the fixed expenses plus target operating income by contribution margin ratio to find the sales dollars needed. And you can have 7,000 plus 4,900. You may ask me, hey, what is 4,900? Well, that's in the question. The question asks, in order to earn 4,900, okay, how many revenues you need to sell, and how much is the total revenues you need to bring to the business. So this is 4,900. So you add that to 7,000, and this time we're looking for sales dollars or revenues needed. So we divide the numerator by 40% to arrive at 29,750. So that's how you get the sales dollars needed. I think this question is quite nice. Now let's take a look at a particular example here. So Crystal Cruise Line offers nightly dinner cruises off the coast of Miami, San Francisco, and Seattle. Dinner cruise tickets sell for $50 per passenger. Crystal Cruise Line's variable cost of providing the dinner is $20 per passenger, and the fixed cost of operating the vessels, depreciation, salaries, docking fees, and other expenses is $210,000 per month. The company's relevant rent extends to 14,000 monthly passengers. Now the question is, number one, we need to find a break even. Use the information from the Crystal Cruise Line dataset to compute the number of dinner cruise tickets it must sell to break even, and the sales dollars needed to break even. So there are two questions. Number one, I want to know the quantity, how many tickets I need to sell. Second, I need to know what equivalently, how much is the total revenues, okay, in order to break even. So that's this question is looking for. So definitely the key formula here that we are going to deal with is the following. So let me kind of first pull out, kind of review the formulas with you guys. So I guess you still remember that units to be sold is basically fixed expenses plus, okay, target operating income, then divided by the contribution margin, okay, per unit, and the sales dollars needed is kind of similar. It's a fixed expenses plus operating income divided by contribution margin, okay, ratio. So these are the two formulas we're going to use. They are exactly the same formulas we have used in the prior examples. So we're going to use them again in this question here. So in this case, what you need to do is, first of all, if I want to know how many tickets I need to sell in order to break even, I have to know that operating income is 0 in this case. So I have a fixed cost, which is $210,000 per month. So all I need to do is, well, let me find the contribution margin per unit. If I can have that number, I divide the 210,000 by the contribution margin per unit to find the units to be sold. So therefore, we can go to next slide to set up everything. So we have 210,000 that fixed expenses plus break-even income, which is 0, then divided by contribution margin per unit, which is $30. You may say, well, how you get $30? Well, if you look at the selling price, the ticket price is $50. Then the variable cost to provide a dinner is $20. So the contribution margin per unit is $50 minus $20, which is $30. Then you divide the 210,000 by $30. Then in order to break even, you have to sell 7,000 tickets. So you have to have 7,000 passengers in order to break even. Okay. So now the next question, how can we find the sales revenues needed to break even? Okay. So what does 7,000 passengers mean to me? Well, that means a lot of revenues, right? A lot of revenues. So how much is the revenue? You can multiply 7,000 units to break even that number by $50 sales price if you want. Then you get 350,000. So sales revenue needed to break even is 350,000. You may say, hey, wait a minute, you showed me a formula which is using contribution margin ratio. Can I still use that? The answer is yes. Definitely, you can also use contribution margin ratio to find the sales revenues needed to break even. So how to do that? The formula was given, so all you have to do is find the numerator, find the denominator. So what is numerator? It's similar to the prior question. It's a 210,000 plus 0. Okay, break even point means 0 operating income. Then how to find the contribution margin ratio? You have to divide the contribution margin per unit by the sales price. So what is contribution margin? $30. Then what is the selling price? $50. So you divide $30 by $50 to arrive at contribution margin ratio. So once again, let me kind of tell you what is the formula I'm using. The formula is contribution margin per unit, then divided by selling price. Okay, selling price. So $30 divided by $50, you get a 60%. So the final result is 210,000 divided by 60%, which is 350,000. So therefore, you can see the consistency here. You can either use the break-even in units multiplied by the selling price to get the break-even revenues, or you can use the contribution margin ratio to find break-even revenues. So either way. So the next issue is a little bit simple here. It's about how to graph the CVP relationships. So normally I'm not going to ask you to graph CVP during the exams, but this is a very important thing that you better know. For example, when you have later classes requiring you to do some class projects, or maybe you meet with a client, you have to show some graphical demonstrations. And either way, you have to do some graphical analysis. So let's just briefly tell you the how to graph the CVP analysis. So first of all, you need to choose a sales volume. Okay, sales volume, the units times price, whatever, and plot a point for total sales revenue, and draw sales revenue line from origin through the plotted point. Okay, so just like this case, you have sales volume here from 0 to 1,500, and you have sales dollars from 0 to 20,000 US dollars, and this red line is the revenues. Okay, you can use Excel to do that. And what's happening here is you can say that at 1,000 units we have 10,000 revenues. So you can plot this point, and we know that sales volume line actually starts from at the origin and passing through this point. So very naturally you can start drawing a straight line starting from the origin and passing through this dot. So that's how you get this sales revenue line. Okay, so it's pretty easy to get this sales revenue line. The second one is we can draw actually the fixed cost line. So let's assume that in your business, regardless how many units you are going to sell, you always have to pay for 4,000 fixed cost. So which is right here. So that's a fixed cost line. Okay, it's a straight line. It's sitting here. So pretty simple. You pick 4,000. You find this 4,000 mark, 4,000 US dollars mark. That's fixed cost. It's a dollar money. Then you draw a straight line. This blue line. Okay, it's a horizontal line. Okay, so that's good. The next one you can draw actually the total cost line. So this is the green one here. So you can draw this total cost line. It's going to be a fixed plus variable. So that's why you can see that this total cost line starts at what? This y-intercept, which is the fixed cost point here. Then it has a slope due to the variable cost component. So anyway, this green line is the total cost line. So finally, you can really demonstrate. You can tell your client, you can tell your manager, hey, the break-even point actually is located right here. That's the intersection of the red line, which is a revenue line, and the green line, which is a total cost line. The intersection, that's a break-even point. Okay, and actually you can use the break-even point to say more things. The break-even point separates the enclosed areas by these two straight lines into two regions. The one region is operating loss. The operating loss region is to the left of the break-even point, and the operating income region, which is a profit region, that's to the right of the break-even point. At the break-even point, you get a zero, no loss of profit. But to the left you get operating loss, and the right you get operating income. So this actually graphical demonstration is kind of useful and straightforward. I hope you kind of like this this issue here, this operating income, this CVP graph here. So next, I'm going to just quickly go through the objective 3, because this is a very simple issue here, and basically perform sensitivity analysis in response to changing business conditions. So this is a very important subject. However, we are not going to talk very much, because right now I want you to have the mindset. When you do the case studies, that's how you need to consider sensitivity analysis. So what is sensitivity analysis? What do you mean by changing business conditions? You may ask me that. So here's the thing. The business businesses are very unpredictable. We all know that. Okay, this month, next month, and maybe half a year later, you may have a different business and economic environment. Okay, your competitors, the government, and also the global trade, all these factors may give you different results, may give you different outcomes that you can be very unprepared. So managers need to think about, what if there are some increase in costs, such as maybe my employees on strike, they want better benefits, maybe my suppliers suddenly just raise the materials prices, or maybe my competitors suddenly lower down the prices of the similar products. So there are many business conditions change all the time. So the question is how that will affect my business results. So then we can use the so-called CVP analysis, which we have been talking about for a long time, to conduct sensitivity analysis. So basically, the sensitivity analysis is more like what-if analysis. So what if the sales price changes? What if cost change? And what if the sales mix changes? So what if this change? What if that change? So how that will impact my operating income? So we're not going to talk a lot, but I'm going to show you some ideas here. So let's take a look at the first issue. What if the sales price changes? What if the sales price changes? The contribution margin will change. So let's assume that when we say one thing changes, other things remain constant. So in this case, if sales price changes, but other factors remain constant, so in this case, contribution margin will change. Why? Because contribution margin, let's say contribution margin per unit is a result of sales price minus variable cost per unit, right? You can see that when you have sales price change, the contribution margin per unit will change. So the total contribution margin will also change. The total contribution margin is a result of contribution margin per unit multiplied by the number of units. And the break-even point will change. Why? Well, that's pretty simple here, that the break-even point is a result of a fixed cost divided by the contribution margin per unit. If contribution margin per unit changes and fixed costs remain constant, this division will change. So break-even point in units will change. Okay, so that's how we conclude that. The next is what if variable cost changes? Then first of all, contribution margin will change, okay, because the contribution margin per unit is a result of sales price minus variable cost, right? Okay, you can see that. So when you have a variable cost change and the sales price remain constant, so the result will change as well, and the total contribution margin will change as well, because that's a result of a contribution margin per unit and multiplied by the number of units, right? Then break-even point will change as well. That's pretty simple here. It's a similar reason in the prior in the slide before this one. So basically, the break-even point in units is a result of a unchanged fixed cost, then divided by the contribution margin per unit. Okay, in this calculation, if you have a denominator, changes and the fixed costs remain constant, so the division will change. So break-even point in units will change. So next is what if a fixed cost change? Well, if fixed cost change, it will not affect contribution margin because sales prices and a variable cost per unit remain constant. They don't change, so the subtraction will not change. So I'm not going to write down that. But how about a break-even point? Yes, break-even point will change, because if you look at the break-even point formula, that's a result of a fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. So contribution margin per unit remains constant. However, fixed costs, according to the question assumption, fixed costs actually change. So when the fixed costs change, then break-even point will change. Okay, so that's how you can conclude all these impacts and so on. So next one is the sustainability and CVP. This is the last slide in the objective 3. So reducing costs and helping the environment, we know that, and you can use more paper instead of plastics. You can use more woods instead of metal, and also you can decrease the variable cost, make it easier to reach your target profit. So I'm not going to talk too much about sustainability in this objective, but this is a very important domain that eventually you're going to deal with that. In nowadays, people try to emphasize we call it corporate social responsibility, and that's mainly about sustainability. So I hope you enjoy the objectives 2 and 3 in this video lecture, and I will talk about objective 4 in the next video lecture, which is going to be the second video lecture. Alright, I will talk to you later.